The city had learned to hold its breath during storms, but Penelope James had never been good at waiting for trouble to pass. Rain hammered the narrow alley between the hospital annex and the derelict warehouse, turning cobblestones into a treacherous mirror of reflected streetlight. Penelope's shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but she'd taken the long route home, the one that cut through the old quarter where most people wouldn't walk after dark. She told herself it was faster. The truth sat heavier. She couldn't stop scanning shadows for people who needed help, even when she was bone-tired and soaked through. Tonight, the shadows gave her something. He was crumpled against the warehouse wall like discarded laundry, rain plastering dark fabric to a frame that might once have been imposing. Blood pooled beneath him, too much blood, mixing with rainwater to form pale pink rivulets that snaked between stones. Penelope's training kicked in before conscious thought could catch up. She dropped to her knees beside him, fingers already reaching for his throat to check for a pulse. The skin under her fingertips was ice cold. Not dead cold, though, not quite. A heartbeat fluttered there, faint and irregular, like a bird with a broken wing trying to fly. She yanked her phone from her pocket, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. Then she saw his face. Even beneath grime and rain and the slack unconsciousness of someone circling death, he was beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten. Sharp cheekbones, pale skin stretched over aristocratic bones, dark hair that would probably be remarkable when it wasn't plastered to his skull. He looked young and ancient all at once, like a marble statue left out in the weather too long. He also looked like every rough sleeper she'd seen in the hospital's intake ward, threadbare clothes, no identification, no one coming to claim him. Penelope made a decision that would later feel inevitable, though in the moment it was simply what her hands knew how to do. She shrugged out of her jacket and pressed it against the worst of the wounds, a ragged tear across his ribs that oozed dark blood. Her paramedic kit was in her backpack always, because you never knew. Gauze and tape, antiseptic wipes, emergency blanket, not enough for this, not really, but enough to maybe buy him time. "Stay with me," she murmured, more for herself than him. Her fingers worked quickly, cleaning what she could see, wrapping bandages tight enough to slow the bleeding. The rain kept coming, relentless, turning her work into a race against water and cold in whatever had hurt him this badly. He didn't stir, didn't make a sound. She should call an ambulance, she knew that. But something stopped her, a feeling she couldn't name, a sense that moving him, exposing him to fluorescent lights and questions and bureaucracy would somehow be wrong, dangerous even. So instead, she finished bandaging, tucked her emergency blanket around him as best she could, and settled against the wall beside him. Her coat was already ruined anyway, and she'd never been able to leave someone alone in the dark. "You're going to be okay," she told him, willing it to be true. "I've got you." The hours crawled past. Rain drummed a steady rhythm overhead where an overhang gave them a few inches of shelter. Penelope's legs went numb, then stopped bothering her. She checked his pulse every 15 minutes, relieved each time to find it still there, still fighting. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, she started talking to him, rambling stories about her day, about the patient who'd tried to smuggle his cat into the ER, about the coffee machine that only worked if you kicked it twice on the left side. Stupid things, human things. She didn't expect an answer. She just needed to hear a voice in the dark, even if it was only her own. Dawn came slowly, gray light seeping into the alley like dirty water. Penelope's eyes had drifted shut sometime in the last watch. Exhaustion had finally won. So she didn't see the moment when the man beside her drew a full breath, when color returned to skin that had been corpse pale all night, when wounds that should have taken weeks to heal finished knitting themselves shut beneath white bandages. She only felt him move. Her eyes snapped open. He was sitting upright, emergency blanket pooling around his waist, and he was staring at her with eyes that caught the dawn light like polished garnets. Red. Distinctly. Impossibly red. Penelope's brain stuttered through possibilities. Contacts, reflection, exhaustion-induced hallucination. Then he smiled, and she saw teeth too sharp to be human, canines that had no business in a mortal mouth. "You stayed," he said. His voice was rough from disuse, but carried an accent she couldn't place, old world, cultured, with consonants that belonged in a different century. She should run. Every instinct screamed it. Instead, she found herself answering, "You were hurt. I couldn't just leave you." Something shifted in his expression, a crack in carefully maintained composure. He looked at her like she'd done something extraordinary instead of obvious, like she'd surprised him more than anything had in a very long time. "What is your name?" he asked. "Penelope. Penelope James." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What's yours?" A pause, weighted with consideration. Then, "Casimir Gravori." He said it like a man unused to giving his real name to strangers, though the world has other names for me. Should I be worried about that? She was too tired to be appropriately afraid, and some part of her recognized that as dangerous. Probably, but he made no move toward her, despite the hunger she could now see flickering behind those red eyes. "Tell me, Penelope James, do you make a habit of caring for dying beggars in alleys?" "I'm a paramedic. Well, training to be one. It's kind of the job description." "Even when they're already dead?" She glanced at the bandages, at the dried blood that should still be wet. "You don't look very dead." "No." He unwrapped the gauze carefully, revealing skin that was pale and perfect, unmarred by any wound she'd spent hours trying to close. "Not anymore." The words hung between them. Penelope's mind raced through explanations and landed on the only one that made sense, despite making no sense at all. Vampire. The word felt ridiculous even thinking it, like something from movies and paperback novels. But she'd seen the wounds. She'd felt his missing pulse, and now he sat before her whole and healed and looking at her with eyes that reflected light the wrong way. "You're handling this remarkably well," Casimir observed. "I'm probably in shock." "Probably? Are you going to hurt me?" The question came out smaller than she intended. His expression shuddered, something raw flickering across it before disappearing behind aristocratic calm. "No. You gave me something precious tonight, though you couldn't have known it. I do not repay kindness with cruelty." "What did I give you?" "Besides your coat, your supplies, your comfort, and 6 hours of your mortal life?" He stood in one fluid motion, graceful in a way that made her neck prickle with awareness of how fast he could move. "You gave me something I thought lost. You gave me an answer." Before she could ask what he meant, voices echoed from the street, rough, male, dangerous. Casimir's head snapped toward the sound with predatory precision. Every line of his body went taut. "They're looking for a body," he said quietly. "Mine, specifically. They'll be disappointed to find I'm not providing one." "Who? Get up," not harsh, but commanding in a way that had her moving before she'd decided to. He pulled her to her feet, keeping himself between her and the alley's entrance. "You shouldn't be here for this." "For what?" But the men were already rounding the corner, 3 of them, dressed too well for the old quarter, moving with coordinated purpose. They saw Casimir and stopped. One of them swore creatively. "My lord," the nearest said, and there was more fear than respect in the title. "We thought that I was dead?" Casimir's voice could have cut glass. "Yes, I'm sure you did. I'm sure your master will be terribly disappointed to learn otherwise." The man's hand moved toward his jacket. Casimir moved faster. One moment he was beside Penelope. The next, he had the man's wrist locked in a grip that made bones creak. The other 2 backed up, hands raised. "Tell Severin Thorn that his ambitions have outpaced his intelligence," Casimir said conversationally, though his eyes had gone entirely red now, like rubies lit from within. "Tell him the Vampire King does not die in alleyways, and his little coup has failed before it began. Tell him I'm coming for his throat." Vampire King. The words hit Penelope like cold water. The man nodded frantically. Casimir released him, and all 3 scattered like startled crows. Silence rushed back into the alley, broken only by rain that had gentled to mist. Penelope found her voice. "Vampire King." "Yes." Casimir didn't turn, still watching the empty street. "As in, King of the Vampires." "As in that? Yes." "And you were pretending to be, I wasn't pretending anything." Now he did turn, and his face had returned to something almost human, though his eyes still held that deep crimson color. "I walked among the cities forgotten to see how mortals truly behave when there's nothing to gain from kindness. When there's no audience, no reward, no recognition. Most people cross the street. You stopped. Understanding dawned slowly. You let yourself get hurt. You let those men stab you. I allowed myself to weaken enough that mortal weapons could wound me, yes. I wanted to know if anyone would care for a dying stranger with nothing to offer. His gaze held hers, intense and searching. You did. You stayed all night in the rain with someone you thought was a homeless man bleeding out. You talked to him. You told him about coffee machines and smuggled cats. You made him feel human. It's what anyone would know, flat. Final. It isn't. I've walked this city for 3 months. You're the first person who stopped. The first who saw a person instead of a problem to step over. Penelope's mind spun. The exhaustion, the impossibility, the sheer weight of what he was telling her. Why would you do that? Why would a king need to? Because I've ruled for 700 years and I wanted to know if kindness still existed outside my court. His voice went quiet. Inside my court, I'm surrounded by sycophants and schemers, people who bow and scrape and would slit my throat the moment it became advantageous. I wanted to find someone who would help a dying man in the rain simply because he was dying, simply because it was right. The rawness in his words made her chest ache. 700 years of ruling people who only smiled because they feared him. 700 years of wondering if anyone would care if he were just someone. Those men, she said, the ones who attacked you, they're trying to kill you. They were. Now they know I'm alive and returning. But yes, Severin orchestrated that attack, and he won't stop simply because his first attempt failed. Casimir's jaw tightened. He's been maneuvering against me for decades. This was meant to be his checkmate, catch the king weakened and alone, dispose of the body where no one would question it, a beggar dead in an alley, no one important. Except I saw you. I was there. Something dark crossed his expression. Yes, which means you're now a complication Severin will need to eliminate. The words landed with dull finality. Penelope took a step back, then forced herself to stop. Running wouldn't help. If what Casimir said was true and the evidence was standing in front of her, impossible and real, she was already tangled in something she didn't understand. So what now? Her voice only shook a little. Now I take you somewhere safe while I deal with this mess. He pulled a phone from his pocket, the gesture incongruous with everything else about him. Vampire kings shouldn't carry smartphones. My court will need to know I'm alive, and Severin will need to answer for his treason. Your court. The bloodline lords, ancient families who oversee vampire territories across the world. They convene in the old palace beneath the city. He was already typing. I'll have guards escort you to... No. The word came out harder than she intended. You can't just dump me somewhere and expect me to sit quietly while you go off to deal with people who want you dead. Casimir looked up, surprise flickering across his features. You don't understand what you're involving yourself in. Then explain it to me. Don't just I spent all night keeping you alive. I get a say in what happens next. For a long moment, he simply stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a low, genuine sound that transformed his entire face. You're extraordinary. Do you know that? I'm tired and confused and kind of terrified, actually. Yes, and still arguing with a vampire king about strategy. He pocketed the phone. Very well. If you insist on being involved, you should at least understand what you've stepped into. He told her as they walked, keeping to shadows that were already lightening with approaching dawn. The story unfurled like something from a dark fairy tale vampire, courts older than nations, bloodlines that could trace their ancestry back millennia, territories carved up and defended with immortal patience and violence. Casimir Gravori, king of the northern territories, had held his throne longer than most mortals could imagine. He was respected, feared, powerful. But power, he said quietly as they descended stairs that shouldn't exist beneath a condemned subway entrance, power attracted ambition like blood attracted sharks. Severin Thorne was old, nearly as old as Casimir himself, and he'd spent centuries building alliances and waiting for weakness. The staged attack had been his masterstroke. Kill the king during his mortal experiment, make it look like random violence, step into the power vacuum before anyone could object. Why walk among mortals at all if it's so dangerous? Penelope asked. They were deep underground now, in tunnels that gleamed with wealth that had never seen sunlight. Gold filigree traced the walls, ancient tapestries hung in perfect preservation. Because I was forgetting what it meant to be more than power, Casimir's voice echoed softly off stone. When you live as long as I have, when everyone who approaches you wants something, you begin to wonder if connection is even possible anymore. If anyone would care about you without the crown. That's incredibly sad. Yes, simple agreement, no self-pity. It is. They reached massive doors carved with images of ceremonies Penelope couldn't interpret. Casimir pushed them open like they weighed nothing. Beyond lay a throne room that stole her breath-vaulted ceilings lost in shadow, pillars of veined marble, and at the center, a throne of black stone that seemed to drink light. It wasn't empty. A man sat there, pale-haired and sharp-featured, draped in crimson silk that matched his eyes. He looked up as they entered, and his expression cycled through shock, fury, and poorly masked fear in the space of a heartbeat. "Casimir," he said, voice smooth as poisoned honey. "What a pleasant surprise." "Severin." Casimir's tone could have frozen blood. "Get out of my chair." The throne room filled with vampires as word-spread nobles materializing from corridors and chambers, drawn by the impossible sight of their king, returned. Penelope found herself pulled to the side by guards whose polite grip felt like iron, watching as the court assembled with eerie speed and silence. Severin Thorne descended from the throne with deliberate calm, though his eyes kept flickering to Penelope, calculating, recognizing the problem she represented. "You look well," Severin observed, "for a corpse." "I had help." Casimir didn't look at Penelope, but she felt the reference like a physical touch. From someone who didn't know she was saving a king, just thought she was saving a man. Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Penelope saw faces turned toward her, beautiful, terrible faces with eyes that glowed red or gold or silver in the torchlight. Some curious, some hungry, all inhuman in ways that made her skin prickle. "How touching," Severin said, "though I confess confusion. You stage a dramatic return, you bring a mortal witness, but you haven't actually accused me of anything." "Haven't I?" Casimir's smile was a predator's expression. "Then let me be clear. You orchestrated an attack on your king. You hired mortal thugs to ambush me while I was weakened, believing you could claim my throne before anyone discovered the truth. You wanted me dead in an alley, unmourned and unremarked. Wild accusations require evidence." "They do." Casimir gestured, and one of the guards stepped forward, one of the three men from the alley, looking significantly worse for wear and absolutely terrified. "This man and his companions were hired to kill a beggar in the old quarter last night. He's been very forthcoming about who paid them." Severin's composure cracked by fractions. "The testimony of a mortal thug. Hardly credible. Then we'll add the testimony of the woman who bandaged my wounds and stayed with me until dawn." Now Casimir did look at Penelope, and his expression gentled. "The woman who witnessed your men return to confirm the kill, who heard me send them back with a message for you." "A mortal's word means nothing in this court," Severin snapped, but his voice had taken on a desperate edge. "Her word means everything." Casimir's voice rang through the throne room, brooking no argument. "She saved my life with no thought of reward. She showed more honor in one night than this court has managed in decades. If she testifies against you, I will believe her over a dozen bloodline lords." Silence, profound and heavy. Then one of the other vampires stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and amber eyes, wearing authority like a cloak. "The king speaks truth. Honor has become rare among us. If a mortal showed true kindness, her testimony holds weight." Her gaze fixed on Severin, cold and assessing. "Unlike some, she has nothing to gain by lying." Others murmured agreement. The tide was turning, Penelope realized. Whatever complex politics governed this court, Casimir's return had upset Severin's careful plans, and now the sharks were circling someone new. Severin saw it too, his face twisted with fury. "You would believe a mortal over your own kind? Over bloodlines that predate nations? She's livestock, Casimir, prey, nothing more. She's the reason I'm standing here instead of rotting in an alley." Casimir's voice went dangerously soft. "Which makes her worth more than you've ever been." The words hung like a death sentence. Severin moved vampire fast, a blur of motion aimed not at Casimir but at Penelope. He crossed the throne room in a heartbeat, clawed hand reaching for her throat. The guards were too slow, too far. Penelope saw her death in his crimson eyes. Then Casimir was there. She didn't see him move. One instant he was by the throne, the next he had Severin by the throat, holding him suspended in the air like a puppet. Casimir's eyes had gone pure red, glowing with power that made the air feel heavy. "You just," he said, voice utterly calm, "made a terminal mistake." He threw Severin across the throne room. The other vampire hit a marble pillar hard enough to crack stone. Before Severin could recover, Casimir was on him not with rage but with methodical, terrifying precision. Each blow landed with calculated force, not killing, not yet, demonstrating. "She is under my protection," Casimir said between strikes. "You threatened her, in my court, in front of witnesses." He hauled Severin up by the collar. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you here and now." Severin spat blood. "I'm a bloodline lord. You can't just execute me without trial. I'm the king. I can do whatever I want." Casimir's grip tightened. "But you're right. This should be official." He dragged Severin back to the center of the throne room and threw him down. The assembled vampires watched in absolute silence. Casimir's voice carried to every corner when he spoke. "Severin Thorn, you are accused of treason against the crown, of conspiracy to murder your king, of attempting to harm an innocent under royal protection. The evidence is clear. The witnesses are many." He looked around the room, meeting dozens of glowing eyes. "Does anyone dispute these charges?" Silence. Even the vampires who might have been Severin's allies said nothing. "Does anyone speak in his defense?" More silence. Casimir nodded slowly. "Then the sentence is exile. You will be stripped of your territory, your title, your place in this court. You will be cast out beyond the borders of my lands, and if you return, you will be killed on sight. Any who harbor you will share your fate." He crouched beside Severin, voice dropping to something almost gentle. "You wanted my throne because you thought I'd grown weak. You thought caring about anything made me vulnerable. Let this be a lesson: I am never more dangerous than when protecting what's mine." Two guards hauled Severin away. He didn't struggle, likely calculating that anything he said now would only worsen his situation. The throne room remained silent until the heavy doors boomed shut. Then chaos erupted, not violence, but voices, vampires all speaking at once, shock and speculation and political maneuvering all happening in an instant. Casimir ignored them, crossing to where Penelope stood with her guard escort. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. The attack had happened so fast. She'd seen her death, and then she'd seen him seen what he truly was when the civilization stripped away. Predator. King. Dangerous in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I need to speak with the bloodline lords," he said. "Smooth over the politics, ensure Severin's allies don't try anything stupid. It will take several hours." He hesitated, and something vulnerable crossed his features. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but I would very much like to speak with you again when things are calmer, if you're willing." "Why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. You said it yourself. I'm mortal." "Why would you want—" "Because you bandaged a dying stranger in the rain." His hand came up, hesitated, then very gently touched her cheek. His skin was cool but not cold, and the gesture was tender in a way that made her chest tight. "Because you stayed when you could have left. Because you saw a person, not a monster or a king or a means to power. Just someone who needed help." "I still see a person," she said softly. "Even after all this." The smile that transformed his face was worth every terrifying moment of the last hour. "Then stay. Please. Let me show you that not everything in this world is violence and politics. Let me show you what you gave back to me." She should say no. Should run back to her normal life, her hospital shifts, her world that made sense. Should put as much distance as possible between herself and vampire courts and assassination attempts. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Okay." His smile widened. "Okay." He assigned her guards 2 vampires named Matthias and Elena, who seemed more bemused than anything by their orders to protect a mortal. They escorted her to chambers that were probably meant for visiting dignitaries, all silk and velvet and furniture that belonged in museums. Elena brought her food that must have come from the mortal world above, then lingered awkwardly until Penelope asked her to stay. "You have questions," Elena said. It wasn't quite a question itself. So many questions. "Most mortals who learn about us don't survive the knowledge." Elena settled into a chair with inhuman grace. "The king is making an exception for you. Several exceptions, actually." "Because I helped him?" "Because you helped him when he was no one. Do you understand what that means to someone who's been king for 700 years? To someone who's forgotten what it's like to be seen without the weight of power?" Elena's eyes, a deep gold, studied her with unnerving focus. "He's been different since he started his experiment. Quieter, sadder. I think he was losing faith in the world. And now? Now he looks at you like you hung the moon." Elena said it matter-of-factly. "Which means you've become the most protected mortal in the city, but also probably the most endangered. Anyone who wants to hurt the king will see you as a target." The thought should terrify her. It did terrify her. But under the fear lay something else, a strange, fierce determination. Casimir had looked so lost in that alley, so alone despite centuries of existence. She'd given him something, and now he was trying to give her something back. Protection, yes, but also trust, hope, the possibility that the gap between their worlds could be bridged. "I can handle it," Penelope said, surprised to find she meant it. Elena's expression shifted to something like approval. "I think you might." Hours passed in that strange underground palace. Penelope slept fitfully on a bed too soft, dreamed of red eyes and rain, woke to find evening falling in the world above. Matthias brought her dinner and news that the king's meeting was concluding. She'd just finished eating when Casimir appeared in the doorway, still dressed in the formal black he'd worn to court, looking exhausted in a way she hadn't seen even when he'd been dying. "Is it done?" she asked. "Mostly. Severin's territory has been redistributed. His allies have sworn renewed loyalty oaths, and I've spent 6 hours explaining why I don't owe anyone an explanation for how I choose to spend my time." He moved into the room with a weariness that seemed to go bone deep. "Politics are exhausting. You could just order them to shut up. You're the king." "I could. But ruling by fear alone is how you end up with ambitious fools like Severin thinking they can take your throne." He settled into the chair Elena had vacated. "I need them to respect me, not just fear me. It's a delicate balance." "Sounds lonely." "It is." He looked at her then, really looked, and his expression softened. Or it was. "Tell me, Penelope James, are you planning to run back to your normal life now that you've seen how complicated mine is?" She considered that. The smart answer was yes. The safe answer was definitely yes. But sitting here, watching him try to hold himself together after a day of political warfare, she found herself thinking about the man in the alley, the one who'd designed an experiment in human kindness because he'd forgotten people could be kind. "I think running would be rude at this point," she said carefully. "You did just rearrange your entire court schedule to keep me safe." "I did do that. And it would be wasteful not to at least see what you wanted to show me. The things that aren't violence and politics." "Very wasteful. Plus, I'm weirdly curious about the whole vampire thing. Do you really not age? What about mirrors? Can you actually turn into a bat? Or is that just—" She stopped because he was laughing, real and unguarded, and the sound filled the room like music. When he looked at her again, his eyes had gone warm, almost human if you ignored the red. "I don't age. Mirrors work fine, and the bat thing is a vicious rumor started by Dracula." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I can, however, move faster than you can see, lift things that should be impossible, and survive just about anything that doesn't involve sunlight or a stake through the heart." "Sunlight actually works?" "Painfully well. It's why we live underground." He gestured around them. "This palace was built 5 centuries ago, deep enough that we never have to worry about dawn. There are tunnels connecting to buildings throughout the city. We can move freely at night, but daylight—" He shrugged. "It burns, quickly." Penelope thought about that, about choosing to live in eternal darkness rather than risk the sun. "Don't you miss it?" "Daytime, I mean." Blue skies and warm light and all that. Something complicated crossed his face. I remember it. Sometimes I think I miss it. But I haven't seen the sun in 700 years. After a while, you forget what you're missing. You just accept that darkness is your world. The sadness in his voice made her chest ache. She stood, crossed to where he sat, and did something probably incredibly stupid. She took his hand. His fingers were cool against hers, but they curled around her palm with surprising gentleness. "Show me your world, then," she said. "The darkness you've made beautiful. Show me why 700 years hasn't worn you down completely." He stared at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what touch could mean without violence or formality behind it. Then he stood, still holding her hand, and led her out of the chamber. The palace unfolded like a fever dream. Casimir walked her through galleries hung with art that predated nations, libraries filled with books in languages that no longer existed, gardens that grew in eternal night under artificial stars. He showed her the Hall of Kings, where portraits of his predecessors lined the walls, vampires with eyes of every color, frozen in paint that had somehow captured their inhuman grace. "This is Alaric," he said, stopping before a painting of a severe man with black hair and silver eyes. "He ruled before me, died in a challenge duel 3 centuries into his reign." Challenge duel? Any vampire can challenge the king for his throne. Single combat, no interference, to the permanent death. Casimir's voice was matter-of-fact. "I've faced 17 challenges in 700 years, won them all, obviously. That's horrifying. That's vampire politics." But he squeezed her hand gently. "Don't worry. No one's stupid enough to challenge me right now. Not after this morning's display." They walked on. He showed her the treasury literal rooms full of gold and jewels and artifacts worth more than entire countries. Showed her the blood archives, where every vampire bloodline's history was recorded in books bound in leather she suspected was better not to ask about. Showed her chambers where visiting dignitaries stayed and training rooms where vampires practiced combat with weapons that looked medieval and deadly. "This is my world," he said as they stood in a ballroom sized for ceremonies, moonlight filtering through high windows of stained glass. "Beautiful and brutal and older than you can imagine. I've spent centuries building it, defending it, trying to make it something more than endless political warfare. Have you succeeded? I don't know." He turned to face her fully, and in the colored light from the windows, his features looked almost alien. "Beautiful, but not human. I thought I had. I thought creating stability, enforcing laws, punishing those who broke our codes, I thought that was enough. But then I walked among mortals and realized I'd built a glittering cage where no one actually cared about anyone else. They care about power, position, survival, not people." "But I'm people," Penelope said softly, "and you care about me. That's something." "You're something," he agreed. "You're everything, actually. You're proof that kindness exists, that connection is possible, that 700 years hasn't made me so inhuman I can't recognize genuine compassion when someone offers it." He lifted his free hand to her face, thumb brushing her cheek with devastating gentleness. "I want to give you everything, Penelope James. Protection, obviously, safety, but also time to know me, time to understand this world, time to decide if you could ever want to be part of it. I'm not asking you to choose now. I'm just asking you to stay long enough to consider it." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "And if I decide this is too much, too dangerous, too strange, then I let you go." His voice was firm despite the pain that flickered in his eyes. "I won't keep you prisoner. I won't force you into a life you don't want. You deserve choice, always. You deserve freedom." He smiled, small and sad. "Even if it means walking away from me." The selflessness of it undid her. This creature who could command armies, who'd ruled for centuries, who could probably force her to stay if he truly wanted, he was offering her the door, offering her escape with no strings attached. That's when Penelope realized she didn't want to escape. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not yet. Maybe not for a while. I want to know you, Casimir, not the king, not the vampire lord you, the person who cared enough about kindness to spend months as a beggar just to see if anyone would help." The kiss happened naturally, like gravity. He pulled her close and she rose on her toes, and their mouths met in the middle, gentle and exploratory and charged with something electric. His lips were cool but warmed under hers, and he kissed like a man who'd forgotten what it meant to want something just for himself. Like every touch was precious. When they broke apart, they were both breathing harder than necessary. Casimir rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "You're going to destroy me," he whispered. "Good," she whispered back. "You look like you could use some destroying." His laugh was breathless. "Stay tonight. Let me show you the rest of the palace. Let me introduce you to people who aren't trying to kill you. Let me prove this world isn't all darkness and danger." "Okay," she said again, the word that seemed to be reshaping her entire life. "Show me." He did. For hours they wandered, and slowly the palace came alive around them. Vampires appeared, nobles and servants and guards, who all treated Casimir with careful respect, and Penelope with cautious curiosity. Elena joined them again, bringing another vampire named Roland, who turned out to be the court's historian, and spent 20 minutes enthusiastically explaining architectural details Penelope only half understood. They ended in Casimir's private quarters, which were surprisingly understated. Books lined the walls, comfortable furniture clustered around a fireplace that burned with flames that gave off no heat. A desk by the window held neat stacks of papers covered in multiple languages. It looked like the room of a scholar, not a king. "I do most of my real work here," Casimir explained, watching her explore. "The throne room is for show, for ceremony. This is where I actually think. It's nice, peaceful." She ran her fingers along book spines, recognizing none of the titles. "Do you read a lot? When you live forever, you need hobbies." He moved to the fireplace, staring into flames that reflected red in his eyes. "I've read most of these volumes a dozen times. Some comfort me. Some remind me of times I'd rather forget. All of them mark the passage of time in a way that matters." "That sounds lonely." "Everything about immortality is lonely." He said it without self-pity, just fact. You watch the world change. You watch everyone you care about die, unless you turn them, which carries its own complications. You become separate, watching humanity from outside instead of being part of it. Penelope moved to stand beside him. "Is that why you did the experiment? Because you felt separate?" "Yes. I wanted to know if I still understood people. If I could still connect to them without the weight of who and what I am getting in the way." He looked at her sidelong. "I expected to be disappointed, expected to confirm that humans are just as selfish as vampires, just with shorter lifespans. Instead, I found you. I'm not special, Casimir. You are special." He turned to face her fully. "You're rare. In 700 years, I've met maybe a handful of people, mortal or vampire, who would have done what you did. Who would have stayed with a dying stranger for no reason except that it was right. That's not common. That's extraordinary." She didn't know what to say to that. So instead, she stepped closer and kissed him again, less tentatively this time. His arms came around her waist, pulling her against him, and the kiss deepened into something that made her head spin. He made a low sound in his throat, hunger and restraint warring in the way he touched her, like he wanted to devour her, but was terrified of breaking her. When they finally broke apart, she was the one breathless. He looked barely affected, except for the intensity in his eyes. "I should let you rest," he said, voice rough. "You've been awake for over 30 hours. You need sleep." She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Need to understand this. Need to know if what I'm feeling is real or just adrenaline and exhaustion and the sheer impossibility of everything that's happened." "Rest first," he said gently. "Let your mind catch up to your heart. I'll have Elena take you back to your chambers. In the evening, if you're willing, I'd like to show you more. And we need to discuss practicalities, how to keep you safe, whether you're returning to work, what you want to tell your friends and family." The reminder of the real world was like cold water. "Oh God, my phone. I was supposed to text my roommate when I got home. She's probably freaking out." "We can get you a phone. You can tell her—" He paused. "Actually, what can you tell her?" "That's an excellent question." They looked at each other. The weight of impossible secrets hung between them. How did you explain to your roommate that you'd spent the night bandaging a vampire king and now you were living in an underground palace? You didn't, probably. You made up a lie about staying late at the hospital or visiting a friend or literally anything more believable than the truth. I'll figure something out, Penelope said. But yeah, I should sleep. And text Sarah before she calls the police. Casimir summoned Elena with a gesture, and the guard appeared so quickly she must have been waiting nearby. He gave instructions in a language Penelope didn't recognize, something old and fluid that sounded like water over stones. Elena nodded, then offered Penelope a small smile. Come on, let's get you settled before you fall over. Penelope followed, but looked back at Casimir before leaving. He stood by the fireplace still, watching her with an expression that made her chest tight, hunger and hope and something tender warring in those impossible red eyes. Thank you, she said, for showing me all this. Thank you for staying. Simple words, but weighted with 700 years of loneliness. The chambers Elena led her to were the same as before, but someone had added clothes in roughly Penelope's size, soft, comfortable things that looked expensive. There was also a phone on the bedside table, new and already charged. The king thought you might need that, Elena said. It's yours. No tracking, no monitoring. He wants you to have privacy. Penelope picked it up, surprised by the gesture. A vampire king giving her an unmonitored phone, trusting her not to call for help or expose his world. The faith in that small action was staggering. He's different with you, Elena said quietly. I've served him for 80 years, and I've never seen him like this. Careful, hopeful, almost human. Is that a good thing? I don't know yet. Elena's gold eyes studied her. But it's interesting, and the king hasn't been interested in anything for a long time. So maybe it's good. Maybe you're exactly what he's needed. She left Penelope alone with that thought. Penelope texted Sarah a lie about covering a double shift and crashing in the on-call room, then collapsed onto the bed. Sleep took her fast, dragging her down into dreams of red eyes and rain, and a voice asking why she'd stayed. Because you needed help, she told the dream Casimir, because no one should die alone. Even kings? The dream asked. Especially kings. She woke to artificial twilight, the palace's way of marking evening without access to the sun. Someone had left food outside her door, still warm, along with a note in elegant handwriting that simply said, "When you're ready." Penelope ate, showered in a bathroom that belonged in a luxury hotel, and dressed in the clothes that had been left, black pants and a deep blue shirt that made her eyes look darker. She felt like she was preparing for something significant, though she wasn't sure what. Elena appeared as she was finishing. The king requests your presence, if you're willing. He has something to show you. More palace tours? Something different. Casimir met her in a corridor she didn't recognize, dressed more casually than before in dark pants and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked younger somehow, less weighed down by ceremony. When he saw her, his face transformed with a smile that made her heart skip. You look rested, he said. I look like I borrowed someone's clothes and have no idea what I'm doing. You look beautiful. He said it like fact, not flattery. Come, there's someone I want you to meet. He led her deeper into the palace, down corridors that grew less ornate and more lived in. They passed what looked like residential quarters, heard voices and laughter echoing from behind closed doors. This part of the palace felt different, less like a museum, more like a home. They stopped at a door carved with images of books and stars. Casimir knocked, waited, then opened it when a voice called out. The chamber beyond was chaos, books everywhere, papers covering every surface, strange instruments that might have been scientific equipment or magical artifacts or both. And in the center of it all, hunched over a desk, was a vampire who looked ancient even by immortal standards. White hair, white skin, eyes of pure silver. He glanced up as they entered, and his face creased into a smile. Casimir, you're alive! How inconvenient for Severin! The ancient vampire's voice was surprisingly young, bright with humor. I heard about his spectacular failure. Delightful. Marcus, this is Penelope James. Penelope, this is Marcus Corvinus, my oldest friend and the palace's resident genius. Genius is generous. I'm more of an enthusiastic dabbler. Marcus stood, moving with the careful precision of someone very old or very aware of all the breakable things surrounding him. His silver eyes fixed on Penelope with unnerving focus. So, you're the mortal who saved our king. I just bandaged some wounds. She stayed with me all night in the rain, Casimir corrected, talked to me, made me feel like a person instead of a test subject or a dying stranger. Ah, Marcus's expression softened. Yes, that would do it. Our king has been starving for genuine connection. You gave him quite the gift. He turned to Casimir. I assume you brought her here for more than introductions? I want to discuss options. She's been targeted by Severin's people. She's involved now, whether she wants to be. I need to ensure her safety, but I also need to respect her autonomy. She has a mortal life, responsibilities, people who depend on her. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding passing between him and Casimir without words. You're asking about protection measures, or more. I'm asking about all of it, what we can offer, what's safe, what's possible. The ancient vampire turned to Penelope. What do you want, girl? Not what you think he wants to hear. What do you actually want? It was a good question. Penelope thought about her life, the cramped apartment, the hospital shifts, the exhausting grind of training and student debt, and trying to save everyone who came through the ER doors. She thought about the palace, the impossible beauty and danger, the vampire who'd looked at her like she'd given him the world. I want to help people, she said slowly. That's always been what I want. Medicine, healing, making sure people don't die alone in alleys. But I also, she looked at Casimir, I want to understand this. I want to know if what I'm feeling is real or just the adrenaline of everything that's happened. I want time to figure out if I can really be part of this world. Honest, Marcus sounded approving. Good. Honesty is rare among vampires. We've had too long to learn how to lie convincingly. He moved to a shelf, pulled down a book bound in red leather. There are options. The king can assign you permanent guards, vampires whose only job is keeping you safe. You'd return to your mortal life with invisible protection. That sounds invasive. It is, but effective. Marcus flipped through pages. Or you could stay here. Give up your mortal responsibilities, live in the palace under direct royal protection. Safest option, but you'd lose your independence. I can't just abandon my life. Then there's the third option. Marcus glanced at Casimir. The one you're afraid to suggest. Casimir's jaw tightened. Marcus, she deserves to know all her choices. The ancient vampire's tone was gentle but firm. He looked at Penelope. He could turn you, make you vampire. You'd gain immortality, strength, safety from mortal threats. You'd also lose the sun, need blood to survive, and leave your humanity behind. It's not a decision to make lightly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Penelope's mind raced. Vampire, immortal. Leaving humanity behind, but gaining 700 years or more to figure out who she could become. Never aging, never dying, never... No, Casimir said sharply. That's not. I won't pressure her into that. I won't take her humanity just to make protecting her easier. I didn't say you would. Marcus closed the book. I said she deserves to know it's possible. If she ever chooses it. Someday, if she wants it. Penelope looked between them. Does it hurt? The turning? Like dying, Casimir said bluntly. Because that's what it is. You die and come back different, changed. Most people who are turned don't choose it. It's done to them by vampires who want companions or servants or lovers. They don't have to watch age. I've only turned 3 people in 700 years, all of them injured beyond mortal healing and begging for the chance to survive. Would you turn me, if I asked? His eyes met hers, red and ancient and filled with conflict. I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes immediately. Wants to make you immortal so I never have to watch you die. Part of me thinks you deserve your natural lifespan, deserves the sun and mortality and everything that makes you human. He moved closer. Ask me again in a month, in 6 months, in a year. When you're sure it's what you want and not just fear or obligation or the intensity of everything that's happened. It was the right answer. Penelope knew that. but some part of her whispered that she already knew what she wanted, even if she needed time to admit it. "Okay," she said for the third time since this impossible day began. "For now, what's the compromise? How do I keep my life and stay safe?" Marcus and Casimir exchanged glances. "Guards," Marcus said. "Discreet ones. They'll watch from a distance, intervene only if you're threatened. You can return to work, return to your apartment, live your life with invisible protection." "And when I want to be here?" She gestured at Casimir. "With all this?" "Then you come here." Casimir's voice was firm. "Whenever you want, however often you want. These chambers are yours for as long as you need them. The palace is open to you, always. Even though I'm mortal, even though your court probably thinks I'm insane or manipulative, or even though," he took her hand. "You saved my life. You gave me hope I'd thought was lost. Anyone who has a problem with your presence can take it up with me personally. I promise the conversation will be brief and unpleasant for them." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made her chest warm. "Okay, guards it is. But they stay out of my apartment. I need some privacy. They'll watch the building, not your rooms." Casimir squeezed her hand. "I promise, your life remains your own." Marcus cleared his throat. "Now that we've settled logistics, perhaps I could speak with Casimir alone? Palace business? Rather dull for mortals." Penelope recognized a dismissal when she heard one, but Marcus's smile was kind. "Elena is outside. She'll show you to the libraries if you're interested. We have medical texts that predate modern medicine might be fascinating for a paramedic." The offer was thoughtful enough that Penelope couldn't be offended by the dismissal. She squeezed Casimir's hand back, then left the two ancient vampires to whatever they needed to discuss. Elena did indeed take her to the library's vast chambers of books that smelled like leather and old paper and history. Penelope lost herself in texts about anatomy and healing that showed her how little human medicine had known and how much vampire knowledge had influenced its development over centuries. Hours passed in comfortable silence. She was reading about medieval surgical techniques when Casimir found her again. He looked troubled, the meeting with Marcus having left shadows in his expression. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Marcus reminded me that keeping you safe means preparing for complications." He settled into a chair across from her. "Severin was exiled, but he has allies. Some of them will be angry about his treatment, about a mortal having influence in court, about a dozen other political tangles. They won't move openly against me, but they might try to hurt me. Cheerful thought. I won't let anything happen to you." The intensity in his voice made it a vow. "But you need to understand the danger. Being connected to me, even peripherally, makes you a target. I can protect you, but I can't undo the attention you've drawn." Penelope closed her book, meeting his eyes. "Are you trying to give me another chance to run?" "I'm trying to be honest. You deserve honesty." "Then honestly, I'm scared. This is terrifying, but I'm not running." She leaned forward. "I spent all night with you in that alley because I couldn't leave someone alone. I'm not going to leave you alone now just because things got complicated. We figure this out together." The relief that washed over his face was palpable. "Together. Together," she smiled. "Now show me more of your world. The parts that aren't politics and danger. Show me why 700 years is worth living." He did. Over the following days, Casimir opened his world to her piece by piece. She met other vampires, some wary, some curious, all beautifully strange. She learned about bloodline hierarchies and the complex web of territories and alliances that governed vampire society. She watched training sessions where immortals moved faster than she could track, sparring with grace that looked like deadly dancing. She also returned to her life. Her apartment, her shifts at the hospital, her roommate Sarah, who accepted the cover story about a new boyfriend without too many questions. Guards shadowed her, she never saw them, but she felt their presence, a weight of protection that was oddly comforting. And every evening she returned to the palace, to Casimir. They talked for hours, trading stories her short mortal life against his centuries of existence. He told her about watching empires rise and fall, about wars he'd fought and mistakes he still regretted. She told him about growing up working class, about choosing medicine because she couldn't stand watching people hurt, about the small kindnesses that had shaped her worldview. "You're so young," he said one night as they sat in his chambers, firelight playing across his features. 23 years old. I've lived entire lifetimes that were longer than you've been alive. Does that bother you? It terrifies me." His honesty was stark. "Because you're mortal. Because even if we have 50 years together, that's barely a blink to me. Because I'm going to have to watch you age and die unless—" He stopped. "Unless I turn," she finished. "Unless you turn." He looked at her. "Have you thought about it?" "Constantly." She had. In quiet moments during shifts, in the darkness before sleep, in the middle of conversations with Sarah where she realized she was already keeping secrets that would only grow more complicated with time. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I think eventually, maybe I will be." "Why?" Not pushing, just genuinely curious. "Because I'm falling in love with you." The words came easier than she expected. "Because there's so much I want to learn and do, and one human lifetime isn't enough. Because the idea of leaving you after 50 years, of making you watch me die, hurts more than the idea of giving up the sun." Casimir's expression cracked, vulnerability flooding through. "You can't make that decision for me. You have to want it for yourself." "I do." She moved closer, taking his face in her hands. "I want time, Casimir. Time to know you completely. Time to understand this world. Time to do all the healing and helping I've dreamed of, with resources and knowledge that could make a real difference. I want forever, if it means forever with you." "Penelope." "Not now," she said quickly. "I'm not asking you to turn me tonight. I want to be sure. I want to finish my training, work as a paramedic for a while, experience my human life fully before I choose to leave it. But eventually, yes, I want this. I want you. I want forever." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate and tender all at once. When they broke apart, there were tears on his face, blood red, tracking down white skin like rubies. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "You deserve everything." She wiped the tears away gently. "You deserve someone who sees you, who chooses you, who stays. I love you." The words sounded rusty, like he hadn't said them in centuries. "God help me, I love you so much it feels like dying." "I love you too." Simple, true. And you're not dying. You're finally living. They made love that night, careful and reverent, and charged with the weight of everything they'd promised each other. Afterwards, Penelope lay against him, listening to the heartbeat that was slower than human, but present, proof of life despite immortality. "When?" she asked. "When would we do it? The turning?" "Whenever you're ready." His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. "A year, 5 years, whenever you've lived enough of your mortal life to have no regrets. I'll wait." "Promise?" "I promise. I've waited 700 years to find you. I can wait a few more for you to be sure." She smiled against his chest. "Okay then. But I want to meet more of your world first. See everything. Understand what I'm choosing. Then I'll show you everything." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Every corner of vampire society, every tradition and danger and beautiful, strange thing. You'll know exactly what you're getting into." He kept that promise. Over the following months, Casimir introduced her to vampire society properly. Formal dinners with bloodline lords, ceremonies that dated back millennia, councils where politics played out in careful verbal warfare. She met vampires from across the world, some who treated her with respect and some who made their disdain for mortals clear. Through it all, Casimir stayed beside her, protective but not controlling, letting her navigate the social tangles while making it clear that any real disrespect would be answered swiftly. His presence was a shield and a statement. Penelope James was under the king's protection, and more than that, she had his heart. Not everyone was pleased. A few bloodline lords made subtle attempts to undermine her, spreading rumors or testing her knowledge or simply being cold. Casimir handled each instance with the careful precision of someone who'd ruled for centuries, never overreacting, always proportional, but absolutely unyielding about her place in his life. "They'll come around," He told her after a particularly tense dinner where a lord named Raphael had spent the entire meal making pointed comments about mortal frailty. Or they won't, and they'll learn to keep their opinions to themselves. You can't just intimidate everyone into accepting me. Watch me. But he smiled to soften it. Give them time. You're unprecedented immortal who has the king's genuine affection, who might actually join us as an equal rather than a desperate turning or political move. They don't know how to handle you yet. And when I do turn, will that make it easier or harder? Harder, initially. You'll be young and powerful, my queen, if you choose that title. It will upset hierarchies that have stood for centuries. His eyes gleamed. I'm looking forward to it. Honestly, the court could use some disruption. Penelope laughed despite herself. You're terrible. I'm practical, and I'm done pretending to care what people think about who I love. Who I love. The words still made her heart race, even months into this impossible relationship. She kept working at the hospital, kept living her mortal life, but increasingly she found herself drawn back to the palace. To Casimir, yes, but also to the world he'd opened to her. She started studying vampire medicine with Marcus, learning techniques that could save lives in ways human medicine never could. She befriended Elena and Matthias, learned to spar with guards who moved faster than she could see, memorized the complex web of bloodline politics until she could navigate court functions without Casimir having to translate every interaction. She was becoming part of his world, choosing it, piece by piece. A year after the night in the alley, Severin made his move. He'd been quiet since his exile, vanished into territories beyond Casimir's borders. But he'd been planning, building alliances with vampires who resented the king's authority or simply wanted chaos. The attack came at dawn, when Penelope was leaving the hospital after a night shift. She never saw her assailant's vampire. Fast meant they had her off the street and into a van before she could scream. But her guards saw. They called it in immediately, and within minutes, every vampire loyal to Casimir was mobilizing. Penelope woke in a basement, zip-tied to a chair, head throbbing. Severin stood before her, pale and furious, with two other vampires flanking him. "The king's little mortal," he said, voice dripping contempt. "The weakness he exposed for all the world to see. He's going to kill you for this." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "He'll try. But first, he'll negotiate. He'll offer me anything I want to get you back safely. Territory, titles, a seat at his council. He'll give me everything I lost and more, just to keep his precious human alive." Severin crouched before her. "You made him weak, sentimental, vulnerable, and I'm going to exploit that weakness until he breaks." Penelope forced herself to meet his eyes. "You don't understand him at all. You think love is weakness. That's why you'll never be king. Casimir is more dangerous now than he's ever been, because now he has something to protect. And you just threatened it." Severin's hand cracked across her face, snapping her head to the side. Pain exploded through her jaw. But before he could hit her again, his phone rang. He answered it, listened, and his face went pale. "What do you mean the entire court is here?" Penelope heard it, then sounds above them, movement and voices, and the particular quality of silence that came before violence. Severin swore viciously, grabbed her chair, and hauled her toward the stairs. They emerged into chaos. The building, some abandoned warehouse in a district Penelope didn't recognize, was surrounded, not just by Casimir's guards, but by what looked like half the vampire court. Bloodline lords and their retinues, warriors in formal armor, Marcus with an expression that made him look truly ancient and dangerous. And in the center of it all, absolutely still and radiating fury that felt like standing near a bonfire, stood Casimir. His eyes found Penelope immediately, cataloged the bruise blooming on her face, and something in him went colder than ice. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire space with preternatural clarity. "Severin Thorn, you were exiled. You violated that exile and entered my territory. You kidnapped someone under royal protection. You assaulted the woman I love." Each word fell like a hammer. "Give me one reason I shouldn't end you here and now." "She's my leverage," Severin started, pulling a knife and holding it to Penelope's throat. He didn't finish the sentence. Casimir moved, faster than thought, and suddenly the knife was on the ground, and Severin was pinned against the wall with Casimir's hand crushing his throat. "She's not leverage." Casimir's voice was barely above a whisper, more terrifying than any shout. "She's mine, and you hurt her." "My lord," one of the bloodline lords stepped forward carefully. "Perhaps we should observe proper protocol. A trial." "No trial." Casimir didn't look away from Severin. "He broke exile. He attacked my chosen one. The penalty is death, and I'll carry it out myself." Severin made a gurgling sound. His eyes had gone wide with fear, finally understanding that there would be no negotiation, no mercy, no political maneuvering out of this. He'd threatened the one thing Casimir cared about more than rules or tradition or centuries of protocol. "Any objections?" Casimir asked the assembled court. Silence. Even the vampires who might have been sympathetic to Severin said nothing. You didn't defend someone who kidnapped the king's beloved, not if you wanted to survive. "Good." Casimir's hand tightened, and Severin's struggles weakened. "You wanted my throne because you thought love made me weak. Let this be your last lesson. I am never more dangerous than when protecting what's mine." The snap of Severin's neck echoed across the warehouse. Casimir held him for a moment longer, ensuring the death was permanent, then dropped the body like garbage and turned to Penelope. His hands were gentle despite the violence they'd just committed, carefully untying her bonds and checking her injuries. The bruise on her face made his expression shudder with rage again, but he touched it with devastating tenderness. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have anticipated he'd try something. I should have protected you better." "You saved me." Her voice shook, adrenaline finally hitting. "You came for me." "I'll always come for you." He pulled her against him, and she felt the tension vibrating through his frame. "Always. Anyone who touches you answers to me personally." Marcus appeared beside them. "My lord, we should get her to the palace. She's in shock, and that bruise needs attention." "I'm okay," Penelope protested, but her legs chose that moment to give out. Casimir caught her easily, lifting her like she weighed nothing. "You're not okay, but you will be." He carried her toward the exit, the assembled vampires parting before them. "I've got you." The next hours passed in a blur. Palace healers. Yes, vampire healers checked her over and declared her bruised but fine. Elena brought her tea that tasted like medicine and made the shaking stop. Matthias posted himself outside her chambers with the air of someone who would rather die than let anything else happen to her. Casimir stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand, radiating protective fury that was slowly cooling to concern. "You killed him," Penelope said when they were finally alone. "Yes, because he hurt me. Because he threatened you, hurt you, tried to use you against me." Casimir's jaw tightened. "Because he made you afraid, and I won't tolerate that. I'm not made of glass." "I know." He lifted her hand to his lips. "You're stronger than most vampires I know, but that doesn't mean I have to stand by while people hurt you. I'm the king. Protecting you is both my right and my responsibility. And if the court doesn't like it, then the court can learn to adjust." His eyes met hers, red and absolute. "I've spent 700 years doing what's expected, being what they needed, building this world according to their rules. I'm done with that. You're my priority now. You and the future we're building together." The certainty in his voice made something settle in her chest. "Turn me." He went very still. "What?" "Turn me. Tonight. Now. I don't want to wait anymore." The words poured out. I thought I needed more time, more experience, more of my mortal life. But Severin was right about one thing. As long as I'm human, I'm vulnerable. I'm a weakness someone can exploit. And more than that, I don't want to be separate from your world anymore. I want to be part of it, fully, forever. Penelope, you're in shock. This isn't the time to make this decision. I'm not in shock, I'm sure. She gripped his hand. I've been sure for months. I just kept waiting for the right moment, the perfect time. But there is no perfect time. There's just now, there's just us. And I want forever with you, Casimir. I want to stand beside you as an equal. I want to learn vampire medicine and help Marcus with his research and figure out how to use immortality to do something good. I want all of it, and I don't want to wait anymore. If I turn you tonight, it will look like I did it rashly. like I acted out of fear or possessiveness, or let it look like that. I don't care what they think. She cupped his face. Do you want this? Do you want me beside you forever? More than I've wanted anything in centuries. Then give me forever. He stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for doubt or fear or uncertainty. Whatever he saw, there must have satisfied him, because he slowly nodded. Okay, but not here. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. He stood, pulling her with him. Marcus needs to prepare you, make sure you understand exactly what's going to happen, and the court should witness it, so there's no question about your choice. The whole court? The bloodline lords, at minimum. This isn't just a turning, it's a coronation. If you're going to be vampire, you're going to be my queen. That requires ceremony. The weight of that hit her. Queen. Not just immortal, not just vampire, but royalty in a world older than nations. It should terrify her. Instead, it felt right. Okay, let's do this properly then. Marcus was summoned, bringing books and supplies and a calm efficiency that steadied her nerves. He explained the process in clinical detail. Casimir's venom would kill her mortal body, shut down her organs, stop her heart. There would be pain, significant pain, as the venom rewrote her biology. Then, darkness, a period of death that could last hours or days. And finally, if it worked, she'd wake up changed. If it works? Penelope asked. Most turnings are successful, Marcus said carefully, but there's always risk. Some people don't survive the transformation. Their bodies reject the venom, and they simply don't wake up. Casimir's hand tightened on hers. We don't have to do this now. We can wait. Make sure. No, Penelope's voice was firm. I want this. I'll survive it, I'm sure. Marcus studied her, then nodded slowly. Then let's prepare. The ceremony took place in the throne room at midnight. The bloodline lords assembled in formal dress, filling the space with immortal presence that made the air feel heavy. Penelope wore white traditional for vampire turnings, Marcus had explained, symbol of the death and rebirth. Casimir stood before his throne, dressed in black and silver, every inch the ancient king. When Penelope entered, escorted by Elena and Matthias, his expression softened with love and pride and fear. Penelope James, he said formally as she approached, you stand before this court of your own free will, seeking transformation from mortal to immortal. You understand the cost and consequences. You choose this knowing what you'll gain and what you'll lose. Is this true? It's true. Her voice carried clear across the throne room. I choose this. I choose you. I choose forever. Then kneel. She knelt before him, heart racing. Casimir stepped down from the throne, moving to stand behind her. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, gentle despite the strength in them. By the old laws and the old ways, I claim you, he said, voice resonating with power. By venom and blood and will, I make you mine. By transformation and rebirth, I make you vampire. By crown and court and centuries of rule, I make you queen. He knelt beside her, tilted her head to expose her throat. His voice dropped to something only she could hear. I love you. When you wake, I'll be here, I promise. Then his fangs pierced her throat, and the world went white with pain. It felt like fire in her veins, spreading from the bite point to every extremity. Her heart hammered, trying to fight the venom, then began to slow. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. She heard Casimir's voice, distant and distorted, saying something she couldn't understand. Felt him lift her, carry her somewhere. Then nothing. Death was quiet. Peaceful even. Penelope floated in darkness that felt like sleep, aware of nothing but a distant sense that something was changing, that she was becoming different, that the person who had knelt in that throne room was being unmade and remade into something new. Time passed, seconds or centuries, impossible to tell. Then, slowly, sensation returned. Heartbeat, sluggish and strange. Breath, unnecessary but automatic. Awareness of a body that felt both familiar and foreign. Penelope opened her eyes. The world had changed. Colors were sharper, deeper, more vibrant than she'd ever seen. Sounds layered over each other with crystal clarity. She could hear conversations happening floors away, could distinguish individual heartbeats in the distance. Sense overwhelmed her, complex and telling, carrying information she'd never been able to access before. And sitting beside her bed, holding her hand, looking exhausted and relieved and beautiful in the lamplight, was Casimir. "Welcome back," he said softly. She sat up too fast, vampire fast, and found herself across the room before she'd intended to move. Casimir was there immediately, steadying her with gentle hands. "Easy. You'll need to learn your new strength. Everything is different now." "Different?" "Yes." Penelope looked down at her hands, seeing skin that had gone pale and perfect, nails that looked stronger, veins that carried venom instead of just blood. She could feel power humming under her skin, potential she'd never possessed before. "How long?" Her voice came out different, too richer, with harmonics that hadn't been there before. 2 days. You're actually fast. Some transformations take a week." Casimir guided her back to the bed, moving slowly to let her adjust. "How do you feel?" "Strange. Powerful. Hungry." The last word came with recognition of a need she'd never experienced, thirst that had nothing to do with water. "That's normal. Your body needs blood now. We have supplies, ethically sourced donors who provide willingly in exchange for payment. You'll never have to hurt anyone to feed." The relief of that was palpable. "And the sun? You'll burn in direct sunlight. Not immediately fatal, but extremely painful. We avoid it entirely." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "I'm sorry. I know what you're giving up. I know what I'm gaining." She leaned into his touch, marveling at how much more she could feel, now the cool texture of his skin, the faint tremor in his fingers, the love radiating from him like heat. "You. Forever. It's worth it." His kiss was different now. She could match his strength, move at his speed, feel everything with new intensity. When they broke apart, they were both breathing harder than necessary, old habits persisting in new bodies. "The court wants to see you," Casimir said. "They need to witness that you survived, that the transformation was successful. Are you ready for that?" "Do I look okay?" She glanced down at herself, still in the white dress from the ceremony. "You look like a vampire queen." His smile was warm. "Beautiful and dangerous and mine." The throne room was full again. Bloodline lords and their retinues, Marcus beaming from the front row, Elena and Matthias standing at attention. They all turned as Penelope entered, and she felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. But she was different now, stronger. She met their gazes without flinching, seeing the calculation and reassessment in immortal eyes. Some looked pleased, some looked wary. A few looked genuinely happy for their king. Casimir led her to the throne, not to kneel this time, but to stand beside it. When he sat, he pulled her down beside him, arranging her so they shared the seat built for one. A statement, clear and undeniable. "Behold Penelope Gravori," he announced, voice carrying across the throne room. "My queen, my chosen, my equal. She who showed kindness to a dying stranger. She who faced down exile and assassination without breaking. She who chose transformation and immortality of her own free will. She who will rule beside me for as long as this court stands." Gravori. He'd given her his name, made her family, not just consort. Penelope felt the significance of that settle over her like a crown. One by one, the bloodline lords approached and knelt, offering formal oaths of loyalty. Some were grudging, others sincere, all necessary. Penelope accepted them with grace she hadn't known she possessed, feeling Casimir's presence beside her like an anchor. When the last oath was given, Casimir stood, pulling her with him. "Let it be known across all territories, any who threaten my queen threaten me. Any who show her disrespect answer to me personally. She is vampire, she is royalty, and she is mine." His gaze swept the assembled court. "Celebrate with us, or leave quietly. Those are your options." The tension broke. Music started from somewhere, and the formal ceremony dissolved into something closer to a party. Vampires who'd been coldly political approached with genuine congratulations. Marcus hugged her, carefully accounting for her new strength. Elena produced a glass of blood donor blood, she assured, and taught Penelope how to drink without making a mess. Hours passed in a blur of introductions and well-wishes and growing comfort in her new body. Casimir stayed beside her throughout, protective, but letting her navigate the social waters herself. She was vampire now, queen now, and she needed to establish herself as capable. Finally, as the celebration was winding down, they escaped back to Casimir's chambers. Alone at last, Penelope let herself collapse onto the couch, marveling at the fact that she wasn't actually tired, just overwhelmed. "That was intense," she said. "You were magnificent." Casimir settled beside her, pulling her against him. "Natural and confident, and every inch a queen. I'm so proud of you." "I'm terrified I'm going to mess this up." "You won't. You're going to be extraordinary." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "You already are." She turned to look at him, seeing details she'd never been able to before, flecks of darker red in his crimson eyes, the precise angle of his features, the way lamplight caught on white hair. He was beautiful in ways that mortal eyes couldn't fully appreciate. "I love you," she said. "Thank you for waiting for me, for letting me choose this instead of forcing it." "I love you too." His arms tightened around her. "Thank you for choosing me, for seeing who I was beneath the crown, for staying in that alley when you could have left. Best decision I ever made. Bandaging a dying beggar, bandaging my future husband." She said it casually, watching his reaction. Casimir went very still. "Husband? Well, queen implies there's a king. I assume that comes with some kind of formal arrangement." She kept her voice light despite her racing heart. "Unless vampire royalty doesn't do marriage?" "We do. Bonding ceremonies, actually, more permanent than mortal marriage, binding two vampires together for eternity." His eyes searched her face. "Is that what you want?" "Eventually, maybe soon. We've got forever now, no need to rush. But yes." She cupped his face. "I want everything with you. Every ceremony, every tradition, every moment of forever." The smile that transformed his face was worth every risk she'd taken. "Then you'll have it. All of it. Starting now." He kissed her, and it was different from every kiss before. No barriers between them now, no mortality separating their worlds. Just two vampires, two immortals, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something lasting. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustment. Penelope learned to control her new strength, to move at vampire speeds without destroying everything she touched, to hunt ethically with Casimir in territories where wild animals provided sustenance. She continued studying medicine with Marcus, discovering that vampire healing combined with mortal medical knowledge could do extraordinary things. She also learned to navigate court politics as an insider rather than protected outsider. Some vampires remained cold, but most accepted her once they saw she wasn't just decoration. She was smart, capable, and genuinely interested in improving vampire society. She started proposing reforms, ways to reduce violence and encourage cooperation. Casimir supported every initiative, backing her authority with his own. 3 months after her transformation, they held the bonding ceremony. It was smaller than her, turning just the bloodline lords and close friends, witness to vows that would last for eternity. Penelope wore red this time, symbol of the blood they shared. Casimir wore white, reversal of tradition that made Marcus smile. "I thought you'd be dead within the hour when I found you in that alley," Penelope said as part of her vows. "I thought I was just buying time, offering comfort to someone with no chance at survival. I had no idea I was saving a king. No idea you'd end up saving me right back." "You gave me everything," Casimir replied, voice thick with emotion. "Hope when I'd forgotten what it felt like. Kindness when I'd convinced myself it didn't exist. Love when I thought I'd never deserve it. You are my queen, my partner, my heart. Forever isn't long enough, but I'll take every moment I can get." They exchanged blood formal, ceremonial, binding them together in ways that went deeper than marriage. When it was done, Penelope felt something shift, a connection to Casimir that was almost telepathic in its intimacy. She could sense his emotions, feel his presence even when he was distant, and he could feel her the same way. "Is this normal?" she whispered as they stood before the assembled witnesses, still linked. "For bonded pairs, yes. It will fade to background awareness over time, but we'll always know where the other is, how they're feeling, if they're in danger." His hand tightened on hers. "I'll never lose you now." "Good. I'd hate to have to haunt you from beyond the grave." His laugh echoed across the ceremony hall, joy and love and relief all tangled together. The celebration afterwards was genuine vampires who'd been skeptical of their relationship, now saw the depth of it, saw how Casimir had changed since finding Penelope. He smiled more, laughed freely, engaged with his court instead of merely tolerating them. She'd made him human again, or as close to human as a 700-year-old vampire king could be. A year after the bonding, Penelope stood in the same alley where everything had started. Rain fell softly, gentler than that first night, but the shadows were the same. She'd asked Casimir to bring her here, needing to see the place with vampire eyes. "I was so scared that night," she said softly. "I thought you were going to die. I thought I was watching someone's last moments." "You were, in a way." Casimir stood beside her, white hair darkening with rain. "The person I was before that night, lonely, cynical, losing faith, he died in this alley. You helped someone new be born, someone who remembered how to hope. I just bandaged some wounds. You saved a king." He pulled her close. "And then you became a queen. Best trade in history." Penelope laughed, leaning into him. "No regrets? About turning you? Never. About finding you? Impossible." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You're my forever, Penelope. My proof that 700 years of waiting was worth it." Dramatic. "I'm a vampire king. Drama is in the job description." They stood there for a while, rain falling around them, both remembering and celebrating the night that had changed everything. Then Casimir took her hand, and together they walked back into the darkness that was their world now. Their kingdom, their future, their forever. In the palace, Marcus was waiting with news of a breakthrough in vampire mortal medical cooperation. Elena had training exercises planned that would push Penelope's new abilities. Matthias had compiled a list of political situations requiring attention. The court had questions, the bloodlines had concerns, and immortality stretched out before them, full of challenges and opportunities and endless possibility. But for now, walking hand in hand through rain-slick streets, a former paramedic and a vampire king found themselves simply content. She'd bandaged a wounded beggar in the darkness. At dawn, he'd risen as who he truly was, and together they'd built something worth eternity. The beginning of their story was written in rain and blood and desperation. But the rest would be written in love and partnership and the steady conviction that kindness, true, genuine kindness, was the most powerful magic of all. Forever started in an alley, but it would unfold in a palace, a kingdom, a world they'd reshape together. And that, Penelope thought as Casimir smiled at her in the darkness, was exactly the kind of forever she'd choose every time.